Colleagues, only yes means yes. We understand this principle almost everywhere in our legal systems. If someone takes your money without consent, it is theft. If someone grabs your bag without consent, it is a crime. If someone enters your home uninvited and takes what is yours, it is clearly illegal. In all these cases, the law is simple. Without consent, there is a violation. So why does this clarity disappear when it comes to a person's body? Why is impunity tolerated when women and girls are the main victims? Why, in parts of our union, is it still not fully recognized in law that sex without consent is rape? We are in 2026, and yet in too many member states, the law offers stronger and clearer protections for objects, for a wallet, a phone, a piece of property, than it does for a woman's body. That is not just a legal gap. It is a moral failure. Only yes must mean yes, everywhere for everyone. During the last mandate, I had the honor to serve as a co-rapporteur for the directive on combating violence against women and domestic violence. In that process, we fought hard to include what should be self-evident, that rape must be defined by the absence of consent. We negotiated, we argued, we built compromises, and we came incredibly close. But at the final moment, this was blocked by a blocking minority in the Council, an unholy alliance of men. The former Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, former Minister of Justice Marco Buschmann in Germany, and the French President Emmanuel Macron. Let me be very clear. There is a legal basis in the EU law, despite what these three men and others have said. In Article 83, one of the treaty allows us to act against sexual exploitation. If rape is not exploitation, what is exploitation? And the Istanbul Convention is even clearer. It requires states to define rape based on the absence of consent, and states that consent must be given voluntarily as the result of a person's free will. These are not political preferences, they are legal and moral obligations. Colleagues, women in the European Union still face major barriers in accessing justice for rape. The vast majority of rapes are never reported, and of those that are, very few lead to conviction. Too many survivors are met with doubt and prejudice. They are questioned, not believed, and even blamed. And that fear of not being believed or being shamed is one of the main reasons of so many women not reporting at all. The scale of this is undeniable. 1 in 6 women in the EU has experienced sexual violence. 1 in 3 has experienced physical or sexual violence since the age of 15. And yet only 13.9% of victims report to the police. Only 20.5% reach out to healthcare or social services. And only 1 in 200 rapes results in a conviction in Europe. At the same time, we see a disturbing reality. Only online spaces where men exchange so-called tips on how to rape, reaching tens of millions of views just in a few days. This is a rape culture, and it must be replaced with a culture of consent. Because laws shape norms. Consent-based legislation is not just legal reform. It is a societal change. Behind every number is a real person, a life impacted. Colleagues, it's time for only yes means yes all across our union.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker, will be the second rapporteur, Ms. Schöring-Wielgus, for 4 minutes, please.
Pani Przewodnicząca.
Madam President, each and every one of us comes to politics with something that hurts us, something that cannot be left behind closed doors, something that keeps us awake at night. And this subject is one such thing for me. When we talk about European definition of rape, I do not see an item on the agenda. I see faces of women who remained silent, who were not believed, whom the system told that it wasn't rape. How many women do you know personally? 100? Maybe 200? Think about their faces. It's your colleagues, your sisters, maybe your family members. 1 in 3 of them experienced sexual violence. It's not a statistical data item, not a anonymous case from this report. It might be a woman you know, whose name you know. Maybe you were sitting together at a table, laughing, talking, not even knowing what has happened to her. So do not think about numbers. Think about concrete women, because facts are terrible. 1 in 3 women in the EU experienced physical or sexual violence. And we have heard recently that on the internet there are websites that actually teach how to rape women, and they get 60 million views per month. This is terrible. Sexual violence doesn't come from nowhere. It grows where there is no punishment for the perpetrators, where women are dehumanized. And unfortunately, violence is too often normalized. Internet teaches how to be violent, and the system does not guarantee safety. And we want to change that. And it's important to understand that a victim may not always have strength to fight, to say no. They can fight, yes, but they can also freeze or faint, and that does not mean consent. So our law and our institutions must clearly understand that there is no one correct behavior if you are a victim. And we also have to stop thinking that rape is something that happens in a dark alley and is perpetrated by a stranger. That is not the case. In many cases, the perpetrator is a partner, a colleague, an acquaintance. Many women experience sexual violence perpetrated by their partners. And unfortunately, only 1 in 7 victims report rape to the police. They do not have the strength to do it. They do not believe they will be treated seriously. One more thing. We speak in our report about the fact that only 1 in 5 women contacted a doctor or social care system. That is why we have to support them on every step of the way, because the way to justice does not end in court. This report says very clearly, any sexual act without consent is rape. And in Europe, we cannot just build our legal system around the question whether the victim was resisting sufficiently. And of course, it cannot be that a definition of rape changes when you cross a border. This means that it's very difficult for our police officers and our judges to cooperate in a cross-border environment, and we also do not provide sufficient protection to our victims. It's not just about common rules, it's also about protection, efficient protection. And our report is not the end of this process. We just open the next stage. The European Parliament is ready. It tells the European Commission, Madam Commissioner, we have done our job. Now the ball is in your court. And let me appeal for you tomorrow. Please vote in favor. We need to change the law.
And I will now give the floor to the Commission. And Commissioner Labib, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Honourable members, let me begin by thanking the co-rapporteurs and the shadow rapporteur for their outstanding work on this vital report on an issue that is very close to my heart. Last year's gender-based violence survey confirmed that the prevalence of gender-based violence remains too high. Nearly 1 in 5 women in the EU have experienced sexual violence, including rape and other unwanted sexual acts. And as you rightly said, this is not just a number, it is a call for action. That the data is very clear. Most rapes are not committed by a stranger in dark streets. They are committed by someone the victims knows very well. A recent CNN As Equals investigation laid bare this reality, exposing online networks where men encourage each other to drug and assault their own partners and share tips on evading detection. We must do more because every woman and girl in our union deserves the right to be and to feel safe everywhere, in our cities, in our bars and in our houses. In March last year, I presented our roadmap for women's rights, which includes a clear objectives to prevent and combat sexual violence, including rape based on lack of consent. So let me be clear. There is no time to waste here. I want my daughter, my baby granddaughter, and every single girl and boy to grow up in a Europe where consent is the cornerstone of all sexual activities. Honourable members, with this report, you have sent a very clear message. Having a definition of rape based on the lack of consent across the EU is an absolute priority. The Commission stands firmly with you. Our recently adopted gender equality strategy underscores this commitment. The Commission will support national reforms putting in place definitions of rape based on the concept of consent. We will also conduct a comprehensive mapping of the current legislation across the EU to identify further action, including legislative, to ensure that sex without consent is defined as rape across the EU. Rest assured that we will continue to take all possible measures to achieve such recognition in Europe. So I welcome the report's strong emphasis on the landmark directive on combating violence against women and domestic violence and the importance of the implementation. Let me assure you that the Commission is fully committed to ensuring its key measures take roots across the Union. A cornerstone of this progress is Article 35 on preventive measures to promote the central role of consent. This will help us build a union where everyone growing up understands that non-consensual sex is a criminal offence. I would like also to take this opportunity to highlight the importance of the ongoing trilogues for establishing a harmonised definition of rape based on lack of consent in the recast directive on combating child sexual abuse. While this would only address the rape of children above the age of sexual consent but under 18, it will represent a crucial step forward for the EU. I sincerely hope you can reach an agreement with the Council on a definition that ensures that all non-consensual sexual acts are criminalised. A child's freezing in fright should never be mistaken for consent. Rape is and must always be considered as a crime in our union of equality. I trust that we can count on your support also in this fight, just as we have before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Labib, for this. And now we will start with the first round of speakers on behalf of the political groups, beginning with EPP and Ms. Mertens for 2 minutes, please.
Frau Präsidentin.
Madam President, colleagues, a person can freeze with fear. A person can say no internally, but not say it. A person can feel helpless when alcohol or drugs make it impossible to resist. This is something that our legislation cannot neglect. A lack of resistance does not mean consent, and that's what this report is about. It doesn't make a difference to Europe's women which side of a border they live on. We're not starting from zero. A lack of consent is already a grounds for the crime to be considered as rape. But in many countries, resistance and physical resistance and express no's are made too important. People freeze, people feel pressured, people feel helpless. So this report is an important political signal We want to close the loopholes in protection. We want to ensure that people across Europe can have similar standards and can rely on them. But there's one thing that has to be clear from the outset. Sexual acts without consent have to be punishable under criminal law. Lack of resistance is not consent. What's at the centre of this report is the legal definition of rape and its European harmonization. It's a question of legal certainty, standards that protect victims, and function in practice. Support, prevention, and advice are very important for those affected. It's not just the task of criminal law. They are not the core of this report, but we will have to deal with those in future as well. Today, what we're talking about is that clear line. Sexual self-determination has to be better protected. Our objective is more protection, more clarity, and more justice in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Galvez for 1 minute on behalf of S&D, please.
Gracias. Thank you. 1 in 5 women have suffered sexual violence, including rape, which is a broad crime. But unfortunately, people are not reporting it. And in fact, we have seen, as Ms. Pellico has taught us, society makes us feel guilty and laws do not protect us and the institutions do not assist the victims enough. And in fact, we need to make sure that it's a question about consent. We cannot, if someone freezes in fear, we have to recognize this and make sure that the perpetrator is held accountable. So only yes is yes. And in Spain in 2022, this was spearheaded with the gender violence directive didn't go through because of a lack of majority in council. Commissioner, now we must conclude this work. The European Commission must propose a legislative act that defines rape when it's a non-consent act. Sexual violence will not be tolerated. And we must make sure that laws bring us our autonomy back, that perpetrators are held accountable, and that the rights are guaranteed for women in all European countries. Thank you very much.
Very much. The next speaker is Ms. Ehlers on behalf of PFE for 1.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner. Let me be absolutely clear from the outset. Rape is a horrific crime. It must be unequivocally condemned, and victims deserve justice, protection, and the utmost respect. But the proposal that we are discussing here today is not the answer, and harmonization at EU level is certainly not the answer. Because, of course, consent must be central, but reducing it to a constant contract-like requirement drags everyday human interaction into legal territory that would unsettle even the most seasoned law professor. It moves away from assessing coercion, intent, and context, and towards a cold, abstract model that is detached from the realities and the beauty of human interaction. Human relationships do not unfold through formalized steps or legal checklists. They are based on mutual understanding, signals, emotions, and trust. If the law disregards this reality, it risks criminalizing ambiguity rather than targeting real abuse. We all want better protection for victims, but murky standards do not strengthen justice, they weaken it. Colleagues, we must combat rape decisively, but we must do so with laws that are clear, enforceable, and grounded in real life, not with ideological proposals that disregard member state competences, risk unintended consequences, and ignore the realities of human interaction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Ms. Kanko for 1 minute on behalf of ECR, please.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Commissioner. Thank you very much. We all here agree that women need to be protected against rape. Only my feeling, my impression is that we fight rape a lot in our imagination by speaking to each other like we are doing today. And it's very frustrating because in reality, women are still suffering. There is little progress since we have negotiated the law past term against violence against women. Why is the problem? Because each time that we are going to speak about women, we find a reason to add competencies that are not EU competencies, and these stand in the way of efficiency. Our opportunity to really say something about consent-based legislation is unique, and we should focus on that instead of dividing the parliament. Countries that ratified the Istanbul Convention already have legislation, but what if a woman leaves Belgium, where we actually have such a law, and goes to another country in EU where the law doesn't exist and she is raped there? It is that woman that we need to protect together. To do that, Madam Rapporteurs, we need to stick to EU competencies. You will always have my support to fight for consent-based legislation, but we should not forget that this is about women, and we need to focus on them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Hendrickson for 1 minute on behalf of Renew Group. Yes. Please.
Madam President, Commissioner, why did she not fight back? That question is still asked far too often after rape. It places the shame on the victim, not on the perpetrator. This must change now. The essential question should be, was there consent? Sexual violence against women is one of our biggest gender equality issues. It's time to strengthen the protection of victims and survivors and change how sexual offences are viewed across the entire Union. Renew Europe wants to see consent-based rape legislation in the whole EU. And consent must be revocable at any time. My home country, Finland, adopted its consent-based legislation in 2023. And France, for example, has changed its position since the issue was last discussed at the EU level. Now the Commission needs to act and present a new legislative proposal. Sex without consent is rape.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Kamara for 1.5 minutes on behalf of the Greens, please.
Madam Commissioner, colleagues, only yes means yes. It is urgent for our countries to move away from a culture of rape. Those where online men are giving advice as to how to drug their partners. In France, every year, 94 women are victims of rape, but for too long we have asked the wrong questions. Did they fight back? Why did they stay? As if there was a right way to act when there is absolute violence, when the reality is something completely different. We have seen that lives are broken in silence because we know that it doesn't meet up to the image that we have of violence, because there's an issue of domination that is anchored, and we looked astray, and we left women alone, victims alone. Women have sounded the alarm. If this violence is not isolated, it is a patriarchal violence. Despite that, in many European countries, consent is not at the heart of the law. Let us be honest. This debate is not a technical debate. It is a political one, and there are hardcore consequences of those we need to protect. Yes, this text matters. It gives a clear line. Without a yes, there is no consent. And I'd like to thank everyone who has fought and continues to fight to make sure that law changes everywhere. Activists that are unrelenting. Let us all take our responsibility to make sure that we take the culture of rape and make it into a culture of consent.
The next speaker is Ms. Montero for 1.5 minutes on behalf of the Left Group, please.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, President. Ladies and gentlemen, and just think for a second that if you had your backpacks stolen, and if you went to the police and they asked you, why didn't you yell? And then you went to a judge, you said, you're perhaps exaggerating a little bit, maybe you're even lying. In reality, there's no one that got hurt. Can you imagine debates on TV when someone asked, why didn't you just go to work as you should have? And why didn't you just take a coffee with your friends? And debates as to why were they smiling so much after the fact that they had had their bag stolen? And what about, why didn't you go to look for the person who stole stole it? And why did you spend the evening with the person who stole it? And you even went to the house of the person who stole your backpack. You were friends with that person. Think if they asked you why it took you so long to turn up and tell the truth. Well, think of these questions. Think of the bodies of these women when it comes to sexual violence. This is really strong. In fact, society treats women worse than objects. And can you imagine if we don't yell, if we don't have injuries, if we went to the house of the person who violated us? What if it was our husband? And what if nothing happened? The only thing that matters is that without consent, this is sexual violence. It is an aggression. And it's very good news that this parliament is stating to all women in Europe that only yes means yes.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Bohlsdorf for 1 minute on behalf of ESN, please.
Bettgeschichten gehen.
Bedroom stories are nothing to do with anyone else, let alone the European Union. But nevertheless, with this consent-based rape legislation, they're doing exactly that. They are getting involved in the bedrooms of their citizens. Well, we reject that. If you look at the increase in sexual crimes we've had in recent years, it's not from our native bedrooms, and this all started in 2015. It's not caused by husbands who don't accept a no. No, these are men from archaic cultures who we have let into Europe en masse and who do not care a jot about women's rights. In Germany, in 2025, there were 130,000 sexual crimes. Around 40% of the perpetrators did not have a German passport. Well, if you mean it seriously, if you really want to protect women from rape, then you have to protect the streets, not the bedrooms. So in our resolution, we would call for real protection, expulsion of the perpetrators and a lifetime travel ban for them.
And I have a point of order from Mr. Sieper, please.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Well, once again, it's Article 10(4) of the Rules of Procedure. Mrs. Borsdorf, you could call these bedroom stories, then these are not rapes. Is that what you're suggesting? Well, I can remind you that calling other cultures things like archaic, that's deprecatory hate speech, so please do not engage in that. It seems that the border of what is sayable is being moved further and further into racist speech. The ESN is pushing it further and further every single plenary session. Well, I am absolutely sick to death of it.
Very much. We will take note of that, Mr. Sieper. Thank you very much. So that was the first round of speakers on behalf of the political groups, and now I will open the blue card. Please use it. And the next speaker is Ms. Mileti for 1.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Commissioner, dear colleagues. Imagine a woman not moving, frozen, her body stiff, and someone raping every cell of her being, of her body, of her soul. She wants to yell and scream, but no sound comes out of her mouth. She's not screaming. She's not fighting back. She's not running away. Not because she consents, but because she's paralyzed by fear. What some people still ask, why didn't she react? Science recognizes it as freeze response. In other words, an automatic neurobiological reaction of survival when the brain perceives a danger and neither fight nor flight is possible because the body freezes. But inactivity, immobility is not consent, it's terror. Silence is not acceptance, it's shock. And there are other situations where consent is impossible. When a woman is drunk, drugged, unconscious, under the influence of substances, in a state where she cannot understand or choose. A woman under these circumstances cannot say yes. This is why the definition of rape must be based on consent, not based on bruises, on screams, on whether the victim fought back, or as much as the spectators of her tragedy would have liked. And when we try such cases, we must not ask the victim what she was wearing, why didn't she scream, why didn't she run away. There's one essential question: was there a free, clear, and genuine consent? If not, then we're talking about rape. Thank you.
Speaker is Mr. Lopez Aguilar for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissaria Labib.
Commissioner, in the Libe Committee, in the legislative procedure, in the legislation on crimes against women, we were disconcerted by the fact that we weren't able to complete this legislation because of the Council, and the Istanbul Convention is now celebrating its 15th anniversary. We need to know and speak clearly that any sexual act without consent is a rape, and therefore it is urgent for any sexual abuse that goes against free consent should be subjected to criminal legislation that is harmonized in Europe. Moreover, there is an obsolete law in place in member states that states that non-resistance, or because of the freeze response, could be tantamount to consent. It is important to also have sexual education and have training with judges and lawyers that have the role of fighting impunity of any type of rape or sexual aggression against women. Thank you.
Dear colleague, we have a very long speakers list and more topics on the agenda, so please stick to your speaking time. And the next speaker is Mr. Bouzadeh Villalba for 1.5 minutes, please.
50,000 in the Wolfpack have violated children and women in Spain. The government is hiding the data on where these individuals come from, but we know that no less than 50% of these were from abroad. And that means that they are 4 times more likely to commit these crimes compared to Spaniards. And if you look at this data, it's possible to find the solution. So non-consent, sexual, with violence and with intimidation, this has always been a crime. And when it comes to have a consent, the individual who was raped, well, there was no consent that was asked for that. And those young girls who were systematically raped by foreigners, they didn't give their consent. If you look at Sanchez's government, you can see that there were many that were left from prison early. And we are asking for worse jails and life sentences for the worst cases. And of course, foreigners should be deported immediately. In Spain last year, 5,400 rapes were reported. And we cannot commit the same mistake that Pedro Sanchez did in Spain. More money, more observatories, more programs. Well, for us, what we're looking at here are women and children. They are women and our children, and we must protect them. Thank you.
Mr. Bouzadeh Villalba, I have 2 blue cards. Do you want to accept that? Okay, we start with Mr. Oliveira, seat 125, please.
Obrigado, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Mr. Bouzadeh Villalba, the question for you is, if you're so worried about rape committed by foreigners, does it mean that there's no problem with rapes committed by locals? Secondly, well, we are talking about penalties and sentences, but you're not changing the laws, because in many cases, there is no idea of a consent-based rape definition. So in that case, do you think that law is sufficient, even when there is a crime committed and a perpetrator? Are you only interested in propaganda, or are you prepared to take a step forward in fighting sexual abuse?
Reply.
I'm not sure what you heard, sir, but I didn't say any of this. Any type of rape against women and children is something that I'm, of course, outraged by. But I'm also concerned that governments are not telling us where the perpetrators are from. They don't give us the information of the nationality of origin of the perpetrators. But every victim I am concerned about, of course. And we need the highest sentences and life sentences for the worst cases. That is a penitentiary policy that is fundamental, which is when it comes to the sentences and prevention. If you know that you can get out after 6 months or a year, the deterrence isn't the same. So don't commit the crime.
Listen, I had one more blue card. Mr. Sieper, 30 seconds, please remember.
Dear colleague, thank you for accepting the blue card. If all victims are equally important for you, why do you use this debate again to bring up the special cases of foreigners as the perpetrators? If you really care about women, why do you use this debate to frame the problem into a certain way? For this legislation, for this report, it doesn't matter who the perpetrator is. So why don't you just support it? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Busadi Villalba.
Se lo vuelvo a repetir.
Well, I'd like to just reiterate. Speak to any police officer, any investigator, any judge. If we don't analyze the situation of the criminal profile of the sexual aggressor, we will not be able to solve it. If we just condemn every man because he's a man and condemn them just for being men, we're never going to be able to find the solution. Therefore, nationality, origin, beliefs, what they think about women, these beliefs that are imported, that they believe that women are lesser people than men, well, these are things that need to be fought.
So now I will continue with the speakers list, and the next speaker is Ms. Donazan. For 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, President. Sexual violence against women is a crime. It is a serious crime and it should be punished, and it should be punished harshly. Taking this in mind, as the Istanbul Convention says, you need to look at things on a case-by-case basis. So the certainty of the crime should be something that stands up in court to ensure that you actually have a correct conviction. So putting women at the centre of this check, her desire and what she wants. That's why there's this whole issue of a woman saying no. If the woman doesn't give her consent, then it becomes more difficult for the presumed aggressor to defend themselves, because it's a clear act and it's more easy to demonstrate, and therefore they will be punished. So this remains the purview of member states, and the Italian proposal is strengthening penalties when rape happens. So it's good that we're having this debate here in the room. We have the left trying, as they always do, to try and bring into the field of rights, not women's rights, including women's right to self-defence, but very generic, misleading gender ideology, not looking at women's physical fragilities as well. Thank you.
One accepted. From Ms. Strada, seat 87.
Just a minute.
You need to turn on the microphone.
Thank you, President. Onorevole, volevo chiedere.
I wanted to ask you, seeing as you are talking here about direct consent, I'm not quite sure if you fully understand what is behind this initiative. It needs to be based on a consensus. That's what legislation is about, because we know that from the experience of hundreds of thousands of women, and also from studies carried out by the scientific community, that the brain might not respond, no, don't rape me. You might be paralysed with fear. And this is the reason why we shouldn't just be looking at... we should be looking at consent. Because here, that's what we're talking about here, consent.
Invece che debba essere molto...
Well, I think that the woman's desire should be very clear here, because you're looking at years and years and years of defences. I don't really have a lot of trust in debates. I trust women, and I trust women's capabilities, even if they're in a difficult situation, their capability to respond, even to respond in a debate. But I think what we're looking at here is a serious situation. It's not really women's expressed desire that's getting across here.
I don't have time for two at a time, so I will continue with the speakers list. And the next speaker is Ms. Al-Salani for 1 minute, please.
Stop hiding behind legal jargon. Stop hiding behind your pretended care for women. Just stop it. Because this is very simple, straight to the point legislation. We are just asking that only yes means yes. The lack of it, therefore, means no. The lack of it, therefore, is a rape. No matter what the color of the man is, no matter the age, the length, the width. Men are raping, men are violating, men are the ones who are taking control over women's bodies. If you don't believe me, ask the 62 million viewers who watched wives and girlfriends being drugged and raped and streamed online. Ask them. This is not the defense of rule of law. This is not the defense of protection of women. And yet you turn this into migration somehow. It's amazing. You know what? You have already chosen sides. And we as Women Collective, we are tired of your racism, of your sexism, of your lack of responsibility. We are tired of you. Just take responsibility for once.
Thank you.
If you cannot say that only yes means yes, then you have chosen sides of the rapists.
Thank you very much. Ms. Al-Salani, there is a blue card from Mr. Terhes. Do you want to take it?
Of course, I love debate.
Thank you. Seat 350, please, Mr. Terhes.
Thank you. I love debates too. So you were claiming that we should move away from so-called legal jargon. But laws are defining through words objective realities. You just claim right now, outrageous claim, that men are violating women. But I'm asking you to please clarify, what is a woman? Because people in your group are claiming that a man who pretends to be a woman should, in the eyes of your law, acknowledge as a woman. So I restate my question. What exactly is a woman that a man violates? Thank you.
Ms. Al-Salani.
Thank you. My dad taught me once that when a person lacks arguments, then they look for the seeds of the watermelon in the garbage. And this is exactly what the kind of debate. Why don't you let everyone decide what they are? It's not your role as a politician to identify people. It's not your role. You know what your role is? What your responsibility is? Give us the protection. Only yes means yes. Everything else is a rape. That's it.
No, we will. It's up to me to decide whether I will give you the floor for the second time. And we have a very long speakers list, so you will not be given the time. The next speaker is Ms. Scuderi for 1 minute, please.
In France,
an 11-year-old girl was raped by an adult man. The court didn't recognise the crime. Five men raped a woman in Spain, and for the courts, it wasn't rape because there wasn't explicit resistance from the woman. In Italy, the Court of Cassation annulled a rape conviction because you can't take off skinny jeans without the woman's help. My colleagues who were saying that you need to say no, well, these people, I hope you don't end up in court, because when we're talking here about saying no, we're not considering all instances where you can't say no, and putting consent at the if you look at what's happening in Italy, you're actually taking justice away from women. You are taking justice away from the victims. You are saying to all of these thousands of people who have been raped that they do not deserve our protection. Europe's competence is to protect people in all member states in the same way, because only yes means yes.
And the next speaker is Ms. Sarah Sanchez for 1.5 minutes, please.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, President. This Parliament is taking a step that we will always remember, that it's extremely important to remember that if a person has a sexual relation that they did not give their yes to, this is not free, this is sexual violence. For centuries, the bodies of women were used as objects available to men. And in fact, there's a culture that has been built in which women were only considered to have been raped if they resisted. And this is not something that can just be recognized when we are dead, just to wait to recognize our pain once we are dead. And on the hard right, when you take this and you don't recognize the truth of women, you're telling women that what they're doing is they're reporting something that is not true. You are perpetuating this. We are fighting for our empowerment. We live in times of uncertainty, and feminism is here to assist all of humanity. We know that there are reactionary forces that want to subject women, even in the private area. You will not be able to stop the power of feminism because there is a consensus amongst the younger generations. Sexual relations have to be based in consent, equality, and respect. Therefore, those of you on the hard right, we will continue to move forward because only yes means yes. Thank you.
And the next speaker is Mr. Sell for 1 minute, please.
14,000 rapes, and Afghans and Syrians are much more strongly represented among the perpetrators than Germans. And the figures that are not reported in the hundreds of thousands. Now people are saying only yes means yes, but there's two problems with that. First of all, most rapists in Germany don't understand German. And secondly, even if they were victims, the rapist would not be sentenced. In Neukölln, a few weeks ago, someone was raped, but they were defended. The perpetrators were defended by people from the left wing. So when rapes are not being punished, it's because they have accomplices here in the European Parliament and in the courts. Germans, whether or not they come from abroad, do not want our streets to look like Aleppo. That's why we're doing so well in the opinion polls, and your ignorance makes us stronger and stronger.
There are several blue cards, but I can only take one. Do you want to accept it from Ms. Garcia Hamida van der Waal? Seat 32, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sell, if a German girl goes on holiday to Italy and she meets an Italian guy and they decide that they want to have a nice time together and they go to bed and she's feeling all right, but at some point he wants to do something that she doesn't want to do, but she freezes. Don't you want that German girl in Italy to be able to go to the police station the next morning like she would be able to do in Germany and not be treated as if she was not credible, not being asked why she went home with that guy, not being asked if she resisted? Wouldn't you want the same protection that that girl has in Germany, in Italy?
Mr. Sell?
Wissen Sie, Frau Garcia...
Now, Mrs. Garcia Hamida van der Waal, I don't know if you've got children. I've got 2 daughters. My oldest daughter has been a victim of sexual violence. I don't wish it on anyone here in this room to have this kind of conversation. That's why I'm in politics. Because a few years ago, there wasn't this kind of phenomenon on this scale. If you go and talk to other parents, it's a broad problem. And I find it terrible that young women have to experience this and that they can never have a partnership of the kind that I've been able to have, where there is no violence in your first relationship. That's the way I understand the question, and I find it unbearable that you have this moral superiority that you're pointing the finger.
Since you directed her, I will let her ask again. Yeah, please, the floor is yours.
Chair, it's a lie that this didn't happen before, and I am really sorry for your daughter. I have 3, but I will tell you this. That story about a girl, she wasn't German, she was Spanish, she went to Italy, it was me. So this happened, and it happened already almost 20 years ago.
Yeah,
Es tut mir auch leid.
I'm very sorry to hear that. I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But if you look at the numbers, the police criminal statistics do not confirm what you're saying. 8 years ago, we had half as many rapes. What happened in 8 years? Well, why have the numbers gone through the roof? It's because we have uncontrolled migration from people from other cultures.
Well, I will continue with the speakers list, and the next speaker is Mr. Kartheiser for 1 minute, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, President. Feminism is an ideology which betrays women. Most of them want to be happy with their family, their husband and their children. More and more often, feminism stops them doing this because it makes relationships between the two sexes more difficult. Initiatives such as the one we are discussing here today really exposes men to incalculable legal risks when they are courting a woman or when they engage in sexual relations with a woman. Radical feminism is replacing eroticism with constraints, if possible, in writing, and it transforms any sexual act into a potential crime. Men are not protected about being taken to task, accused of rape even decades later. In reality, feminist ideology tries to make heterosexual love more fragile. This Parliament and the Commission essentially are overreaching their competency because criminal law is a national competence. Thank you.
Colleague Kartheiser, would you like to take a blue card from Anna Strollenberg, 645? Please, colleague Strollenberg, sorry, your floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is a new level. When we're talking about rape, putting the blame on women themselves, to make it the blame of rape happening of radical feminism. That is crazy. But I hear your issue, you have a problem with the definition. Well, let's talk about the definition. Right now, we have talked about it. We have seen an investigation of CNN talking about this rape academy. What happened after? It was husbands raping their women, their partners. What happens after? The police could not prosecute these men because they didn't know whether these women were asleep or not. Same happened with Gisèle Pelicot. Men got away with it because they didn't know she couldn't give her consent. Don't you think that this definition is failing?
Yeah, colleague Kartheiser, you have a floor. Je voudrais vous répondre.
Well, what I would like to do is I would like to respond by saying that in my speech I did not talk about the definition of rape, but the consequences of the legislation that you're proposing on sexual relations. I think this is very significant. I would also like to say that the changes that you are proposing here are a serious threat for the legal order in our countries. In the criminal code, there's always been certain measures that would mean that there can be no interpretation on the definition of the crime. And we're seeing more and more that the European Parliament is proposing legislation which is extremely vague, that you can no longer have any legal certainty. And it's very serious. Thank you.
Zipper, you asked the floor, but you already had the blue card, and I will follow Crystal Schaldemose's approach. One blue card per speaker, and not for those who already had a blue card on this point in agenda. Thank you for understanding. So, colleague Javier Parjalejos, you have a floor.
Gracias, señor. Thank you very much, President. Now, no consent means rape. Based on this principle, we should make sure that we are carrying things out properly legally. For example, in Spain, there was a tragic example of bad regulation of rape and sexual violence that needed to be corrected, but it meant that more than 1,000 rapists and sexual assailants were released early. We need to learn to focus on the main objective and not get lost in details. We need to have a solid basis legally, incentivizing and facilitating reporting, and to make sure that it doesn't fall in the statute of limitations. Moreover, we must assist the victims and give them the support following a traumatic event. Assist prosecutors to make sure that they're independent and well informed so that they can investigate and prosecute. Without a harmonized definition, it would be easy to not be able to implement this.
081. Floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, President. Mr. Zasalejo, when it comes to violence against women, have you heard of 100% of women that report in Spain do not come back and do it again? They don't believe in Spanish justice because justice doesn't believe in them. There was a judge in gender violence stating that there are many, many benefits to women so that they report. For example, free legal assistance. Do you know that only 1 in 9 women actually report, and only 1/3 of them actually get to a point where there's a sentence that's handed down? So when it comes to consent, and when it says that there's no consent, it means that it's a rape, and that there are some judges that want to legislate against women. Now, the problem was not the law, it was a bad law. And it came from your political party, by the way. Now, I was just a co-rapporteur on the Victims Directive. What I maintain on all of these subjects is clearly included in the Victims Directive that the Parliament will adopt in the near future, and I'm extremely proud of that work as the co-rapporteur.
Next speaker, Maria Neuchel, for 1 minute, please.
Colleagues, we're here to fight for a single, fair, legal principle when it comes to sexual relations. The only fair principle, and that's real consent. Yes means yes. So I want to talk to the partners of men. That's to say that that if you signed a marriage contract, it doesn't mean that you are absolutely under a long-term sentence. No, we are fighting for a principle by which wives who have entered into vows to marriage contracts to still say no. And if they do not give consent, then it is rape. Why have I talked about the husbands and the long-term partners? They are the most frequent perpetrators. Yes, there are people that jump on women on the street, but they're not the main group of people. It's actually men who are the closest to women who go beyond the borders and rape them.
Colleagues, next speaker, Mathilde Ondrouet, for 1.5 minutes.
The European Parliament is going to impose a harmonised definition of consentment in rape cases, as if the member states were waiting for Brussels to understand how serious these crimes are, as if their jurisdiction didn't include rapists. Well, it's a new one. All member states have their criminal codes, they have their procedures, they have their judges, they are completely independent, they are completely sovereign. So, what can we see behind this attempt to bring about harmonisation, introducing this into the European Union in an area which the EU has no competence on, justice? It is essentially recycling all of the left ideologist tropes, gender inequality, and essentially they're saying that all men are sexually aggressive and they should all be condemned. You're saying all men. That's the real objective of this text, trying to create 2 sets of laws. Those that are women who are victims by nature and men who are perpetrators by nature. If consentment in in rape were to protect women, then you would have seen that in all countries that already apply this. But the reverse is true. There's fewer convictions, and we're protecting our women less. We are leaving our women and daughters alone, and that's not the way forward.
To take a blue card from Manon Aubry. Manon, you have a floor, please.
Merci.
Thank you very much, President. Well, I'm quite surprised because often at Rassemblement National you like to talk about the zero impunity against all criminals. But strangely here, as soon as you start talking about sexual aggressors and rapists, then you're not talking about zero tolerance. Sometimes you even go as far as say, you're copying and pasting and saying that men are all the same and that all men are rapists. But when you're talking about the zero tolerance here, a woman's body, does it have less value? Well, this is a very provocative question. The example that Mrs. Scuderi cited, this 11-year-old child, the rapists were not sentenced on the basis that it was consensual, and that's been validated by the judge. So the issue of consent, well, it's not a consent; it's a demonstration of proof. You can't prove consent or the absence thereof without fragilizing the victim. So the child didn't get justice. I want justice for children because, essentially consent. That's what paedophiles say as well.
So we have a one blue card after, so that's why for others. Please keep ahead for another speakers. So next speaker, Małgorzata Gosiewska.
Dziękuję. Głos przeciwko temu.
Thank you very much. Voting against this report is not voting against victims of sexual violence. It's not voting against consent in interpersonal relations. It is voting against trying to usurp power. The EU would like to impose a definition on all member states, irrespective of their legal tradition. This is not a place for centralization or experiments. The proposal that is being made today has huge risks. It would flip the burden of proof, and it could actually prevent access to justice for victims. Fighting sexual violence is something that can be done by supporting victims and making sure that we are keeping our citizens safe. That means that we have to be able to prosecute effectively, have good security policy and mutual respect. The EU should be a cooperation and not centralization.
Speaker Valérie Devon, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, dear colleagues. The absence of consent should be at the heart of the definition of rape across the European Union. Clearly defining rape as any sexual act without consent, that is protecting all women, including the women like Gisèle Pelicot. CNN recently revealed a terrifying reality. There's a real industry of online rape. Millions of videos of women who were unconscious, drugged. They are freely circulating online. People are exchanging the best advice to drug and to film rape. It's become fun. The Commission and Member States need to take all the necessary measures to bring down these, to close these sites, and need to sanction not only the perpetrators, but also the consumers, because watching this makes you an accomplice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Alice Kuhn-Kehn.
Anything that isn't a yes is a no. That should be clear to everyone. But again and again, rapists go free. That's unacceptable. It's also unacceptable that the Sweden Democrats are not standing up for saying that Swedish legislation is right on this. Instead, they vote against the idea that women across the EU should have the same rights as Swedish women. A European consent law is decisive in the struggle for equality and for victims to get redress. Blame should go where it belongs, and that's to the perpetrators.
Very much. Next speaker, Manon Aubry, please.
Thank you very much, President. Going out for a drink, that is not giving consent. Silence is not giving consent. Smiling is not giving consent. Sleeping next to someone is not giving consent. Taking off your clothes or being in a partnership, that is not giving consent, and giving in is not consenting. How many women have found themselves in this situation? The problem is that the majority of EU member states, in those countries, laws on sexual violence do not recognize consent, and perpetrators can have full impunity. Imagine for a second if just 90% of theft, of thieves were left free without being prosecuted. That is precisely what is happening with rapists. We have lost far too much time. This definition for rape, EU level, should have been adopted, could have been adopted if Macron hadn't given in to other states to stop it from happening. This text, via this text, the EP is sending a strong message. The Commission can no longer ignore it. Men do not have power over women's bodies. Soon it will be written in text, and only yes means yes, only consent based definitions.
Please.
Mulțumesc. Eu sunt siderată să văd că...
Thank you very much. I am appalled to see that there are some women who do not understand what a woman goes through during rape. I am a lawyer. I have defended plenty of women and girls who have been raped because, yes, the problem, it comes from education, and Romania is one of the worst countries in the EU for this. And in Romania, politicians have a massive amount of power. I've represented 9, 10, 11-year-old girls, and we've never really been able to get real investigations because there's because the political powers at play have not allowed that to happen. The decisions have been taken, legal decisions, basically saying that a 9-year-old girl who was raped, she had the discernment to know what was going on. When a woman says no, it means no. When they say yes, it's yes. But in Romania, we need to take into consideration the fact that a woman essentially is condemned by the population, by the media, by the legal system.
Commissioner, colleagues, 92. That was the number of times it is estimated that Giselle Pellicot was raped over the course of a decade. 1,000. That's the number of users in a private Telegram group dedicated to sharing advice on how to drug and rape their partners. 31%. That is the number of women in the EU right now who have experienced physical or sexual violence. And that was from 2025. 41% is the number of Irish women who have experienced physical or sexual violence in 2025. Colleagues, each of these figures we know, a majority of us do know, represent not just data, but lives altered by sexual violence, and too often by systems that fail to respond adequately. Across our European Union, we still see legal frameworks in which, if there is no physical force, threat or coercion, the act may not be recognised as rape. We all know only yes means yes. Anything else is not consent. Defining rape in EU law on the basis of consent is long overdue. We now have a chance to correct the gap that was not delivered on the directive of violence against women because of member states. We now have an act to finish it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Emma Rafovic, please.
Monsieur le Président.
President, colleagues, me too. Balance ton port. Finally, people are making putting the shame where it belongs. We've passed resolutions about violence against women, and although there has been some progress, even from some heads of state like Emmanuel Macron, there are still many countries that have not moved forward. Yes, there has been some progress, but we're not there yet. Women have not been listened to, and their no is not being listened to. Yes is yes, and no is no. And if you don't say anything, it means you do not consent. The names of all these women, our sisters, our mothers, our grandmothers, those who don't believe in justice anymore because they know the figures or they've got an impression of them. 87% of reports are just completely ignored and just archived. I mean, it's not like the far right is saying that it's moralizing desire. No, this is not something that's discussable. It's a rape.
Elizabeth Dieringer, please.
Sexuelle Gewalt ist...
Sexual violence is a crime, and the victims deserve all protection, and the perpetrators need to be dealt with harshly. I don't really think we even need to discuss this anymore. But now we're taking it further, and this is what we're talking about today. There has been a societal shift, and I think this is why it's worth talking about this here. And, you know, yes, figures have changed. Figures have gone up massively. And that's because men have come over into our countries and they have a culture and a worldview which is not the same as ours. This is down to migration and integration policy. And if you walk through our European cities, you will see that. You will see that women don't feel safe anymore. I've noticed it too over the last 52 years. But I don't want to enter into endless debates about various definitions here in this particular house. I don't want to take up time doing that. I want to get to the point of what we're going to do. We need clear data. We need clear consequences. If we have real deterrence and real penalties for perpetrators, we need to re-establish public order. We need a clear migration policies. If we really want to protect women, we should no longer look away. No, we need to call a spade a spade. Thank you.
Irena Joveva, please.
Privolitev, v bistvu zelo preprost koncept, kolegice in kolegi.
Thank you very much. Now, consent is not a difficult concept. You can twist this and turn it as much as you like, but there's not an interpretation problem here. This concept is pretty simple. It's yes or no. And when you're a child, you might not be very happy when your mum says no. Ask my 5-year-old daughter, she'll tell you the same. But I'm not a perfect mother, of course, but I want her to ask for something because she understands it. And the question is, what are you not understanding? The Istanbul Convention is absolutely clear. It is a definition based on consent. Many states have signed up to that definition, but others don't want it. You're talking about national competence. It's a question of political will, yes or no. We've forgotten that without a clear yes, there is no consent. It's not an argument about complicated legal nuances. If there is no yes, then it's no.
Gracias, President.
The figures are staggering. 1 in 5 women in Europe have been raped, and some 20% have been subjected to sexual violence. You know, those of you on the far right, specifically Mr. Bouchardé, don't come to tell women here in this European Parliament that they should go speak with the police to know who the rapists are. We know precisely who those rapists are. And you can just ask those that are sitting around you. We are trying to protect ourselves, us not just from somebody we don't know, but we're also trying to protect us from our violence in our homes, in our workplace, and in our schools. This has a name. It's culture of rape, rape culture. It is not an ideology. It is a precise reality that is unacceptable. This culture has infrastructure that you are denying exists. Online, there are chats that have hundreds of thousands that visit it to find out how to rape. And that is why rape must be on the criminal acts list in the EU. Without consent, it is rape.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie przewodniczący.
Thank you very much, President. According to Amnesty International, 1 in 20 women in the EU has been raped. Those are millions of human tragedies, millions of stories which often have been ignored, and the assailants have not been punished. So this is a definition which should be mandatory in every single member state. We cannot accept that there are areas where women need to show that they resisted, that they protested, that they didn't provoke. We can't accept a scenario whereby women, after the drama of being raped, are then put through the mill once again. We can't have a situation where women's rights stop at the border. We can't talk about equality if protection against violence depends on where you live. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about dignity, safety and fundamental rights. And we, as Europe, as the European Parliament, we need to clearly say that we stand with women, that we support them and we protect them. Thank you.
Estrada, please.
Commissaria.
1 woman in 3 in the EU has suffered sexual violence. 1 in 5 has been raped. We need to do much more to stop this epidemic. We need to start with sexual education and emotional education at schools. We should stop talking about how women should dress. We should be teaching young men not to rape women. Only 1 in 8 actually reports the crime to police. In many cases, a family member or partner or someone they know. But they do all deserve to be on the defendant's seat. So we need a rape law that's based upon consent, because all too often women who report rapes do not get justice. If you get your wallet stolen, then no one would say, you didn't say no clearly enough. You say, oh, the robber was maybe right, perhaps, who knows. But it's more difficult for women who who don't say no, and it seems that shame is in the wrong place at the moment, whereas we need to stop blaming the victims.
Please.
Tænk over, hvordan du klæder dig.
Think about how you're dressed. Check what you're drinking when you go out for a drink. I'm sure plenty of women have heard this advice. Watch out. Think about what you're doing. Online, there are men who are essentially teaching each other how to seduce someone that they want to rape, and they're sharing advice on this. It's such a terrible situation. We're talking here about thousands of women with a rape culture, and we need to call this out very, very loud, because sexual violence will only increase if we don't talk about it. Of course, shame is part and parcel of this, and shame needs to change sides. It shouldn't be the victim who should be ashamed, it should be the perpetrators. Sex without consent should be rape everywhere in Europe. Yes means yes, and no always means no.
Thank you. Next speaker, Rosa Esteras Ferragut.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, every 10 minutes, a woman is killed. And there's no doubt the figures are frightening. We know that women are victims of violence because they are women. The Istanbul Convention is the way forward to prevent this violence against women. It has to be clear, unequivocal, irreversible. And this is key to be able to prevent violence and protect women. Silence can never mean yes. Now, this is nothing to do with the yes means yes law. Lina Galvez knows that that law meant that thousands of rapists got shorter sentenced, and it was Lina Galvez and the socialist group. It was my political party that changed this so that it wouldn't happen. Now, we have to be clear. We all stand together. We cannot have a bad law that sends a dangerous message to society stating that rapists can be freed. The way forward is to follow the path of the Istanbul Convention. We should have serious, tangible actions to be taken.
Marko Vešligaj, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, it is time the European Union changed its definition of rape. It must be consent-based. As we face the alarming growth of violence in all areas, the digital domain is reaching monstrous levels. Recently, we were informed that there are so-called rape academies, where we have a community that is taking advantage of unconscious victims. There are already more than 40 million views every month. So this is really horrendous. They are selling apparently drugs that can erase memory. iCheck is a particularly worrisome label where rapists basically raise the eyelids of victims in order to prove that they are alive but unconscious. This is why it is important for the Commission to adopt the relevant laws and the measures of protection of victims. First of all, the approach must be that only yes means yes. This must be European standard, and this rape industry must be stopped.
Please.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, only yes is yes, otherwise it's rape. Full stop. Point. Basta. It's always the same problem. Self-determination over your own body. Anything else is going too far. It's not just the right to say no, it's about changing the relationship, the balance of power, because it's an expression of power and control. It's embedded in a system that forces women to justify themselves and to prove that they defended themselves. But that's where the problem lies. Why is the responsibility always on the shoulders of those who have to defend themselves? Well, that's the wrong way round. Where is the consent is the question. It shouldn't be the no that's important, it's the lack of a yes. This would mean a change in the balance of power, away from those who exploit, who commit crimes, and it would put the focus on those who need protection. In future, in European countries, only yes is yes.
Wind, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hvis en kvinde stivner og bliver stum.
If a woman is in a state of shock when a robber comes into the house, then nobody would think that the robber should go unpunished. So why is it different when we're talking about sexual consent? Here we are talking about the right to self-determination, determining what happens to your body. In Europe, there are shared rules, or there should be shared rules, because in Europe you shouldn't necessarily have to have bruises or have to scream so that people believe you. The legislation should be on the side of women wherever the women are in Europe. Maybe somebody is on holiday in France or doing Erasmus in Poland or on a city trip to Copenhagen. When I was young, people said that decency was the right thing. So with decency in mind, only yes means yes.
I have a pretty long list, but I will give the floor to everybody. And I will start with Paulo do Nascimento Cabral.
Thank you very much, President Commissioner. If there is no consent, it is rape, and it's a crime. consent has to be explicit and informed and given freely. And that means total freedom, total awareness. We need a robust legal definition that ensures that this concept is harmonized across Europe. And obviously, it needs to be shared across all EU member states so that citizens are less protected depending on what member state they're in. What kind of EU would this be if this situation were allowed to persist? Only 3 countries recognize rape on the basis of a lack of consent. In other countries, the victims are traumatized by questions and interrogations, and they're in a much more vulnerable position. We need proper education for youngsters. Social networks are replacing the kind of sexual and relationship education in schools and homes, and we need to change that around.
Arvoisa puhemies.
Mr. President, I disagree with this House. I do not support consent-based rape legislation at EU level. Firstly, it does not belong to the EU level, as criminal law is fundamentally a national issue. Secondly, we have already enacted such legislation in Finland, which I consider to be a mistake. Let us imagine a situation where 2 people are in complete disagreement in a very intimate situation, but later one of the parties regrets and said that they did not consent. It will be extremely difficult for the accused to prove what really happened during the evening. I want real rapists behind bars, don't get me wrong, for a much longer period than what they serve in prison at the moment. And as regards foreigners who commit rape, I want to deport them from Europe. I encourage every member state to promote these goals. On the other hand, I cannot recommend legislation that only creates uncertainty. Thank you.
Next speaker, Billy Kelleher.
Well, the Istanbul Convention is quite clear on the context of prevention and combating violence against women and domestic violence. And I think it beholds us all in this Parliament to ensure that we put consent as central to any changes in terms of legislation. If we are to talk about human rights, the basic human rights of dignity and bodily autonomy, well then the European Union has to have a consent at the heart of any proposals to ensure that all citizens in every member state can have their bodily integrity vindicated in the case of being violated. We look at the statistics. They're very, very clear. We have a situation in here where some elements try to portray violence against women in various steps and degrees of severity. You know, close family members isn't as bad as a migrant. They are all equally abhorrent. And we must deal with them based on the fact that if a woman says no, she means no. And yes has to be at the centre of any consensual sexual relationships or intimacy. And I find it appalling that we have different scales of severity of rape being portrayed in this House.
Thank you, colleague. Speaker Elena Contura.
Women have been raped, and the majority of cases are not reported because of shame or fear. In many EU member states, the definition of rape needs to be proven, and this has lacune. It leaves unprotected victims to whom chemicals have been administered to reduce their resistance or to make them unconscious. So it leaves victims unprotected because the perpetrator is in a position of power. Because of fear, they freeze, they cannot resist. Sex without consent is rape. Silence is not consent. Fear and absence of resistance are not consent. Consent should be crystal clear. It should be free, clear, and irrevocable. Only yes means yes.
Thank you. Next speaker, Maria Zacharia.
I support the report because it states a fundamental issue of justice. Rape is defined by the absence of consent. Silence is not consent. Fear is not consent. The inability to react is not consent. Today in Europe, the victims are not protected equally. In some member states, they have to prove violence or resistance, and this is a secondary abuse. Greece has acknowledged rape without consent since 2019, but it has a dual system where the absence of consent is dealt with in a different way than violence. The European Union ought to secure a unified, clear, humane framework. Without consent, it is rape. And it ought to support the victims with substantial access to justice, education of the authorities, and change of mindset of culture, because dignity and physical self-determination cannot depend on where one lives in Europe. Thank you.
Speaker Christian Terhes.
Thank you. Noțiunea de viol trebuie să cuprindă nu doar folosirea forței.
Rape should not just cover force, but also consent. But many are speaking of gender. According to the Istanbul Convention, a man who considers himself a woman should be recognized as such. This is an aberration, and it will have a negative impact on women. If a man considers himself a woman, then it would be a lesbian relationship, or if there's a case of a man who considers himself a dog, then this is an animal violence, and therefore we should be looking at protecting women. The definition of woman shouldn't be flexible. We should not let a man who believes himself as a woman to be able to define himself as such.
Thank you, Chair. Think about Ellen, 18 years of age, from Bulgaria. She was doing very well, and then she was raped. But like 70% of other rape victims, she froze during the attack, and she didn't say no. She didn't say stop, and she didn't fight back. So in Bulgaria, this is because the law requires that the victim provides proof that they physically fought back so that they can take a case. So I don't think that this person will be able to take their rapist to court. Now, if she had been in Sweden, things would have been quite different, because the legal definition of rape in Sweden is any sexual act without consent. There is a lack of uniformity around the United States EU member states, and this is a scandal. And there's not agreement about the whole question of whether the absence of consent means rape. We need to have a standard approach to be able to tackle this around Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner Labib. As we see it, criminal law should be subject to the sovereignty of national laws, and no member state should actually have to wait to make its own laws better on sexual crimes, including rape. International cooperations in the area of criminal law is indispensable. It would be an advantage to have uniform crimes that are not subject to the differences in member states. Portugal has transposed the Istanbul Convention and supports the EU's accession to this. They were important steps to combating sexual crimes, including rape, but investigations and work in courts have been important as well. In Portugal, the law does not have a consent-based definition, but nevertheless, lack of consent is taken into account, and the speaker is interrupted.
On the KHI, Lucas Zipper.
Liebe Menschen Europas,
Dear people of Europe, I've got a message for all men. Think about your entire life and everything you experience. Can you guarantee that you've always picked up on the clues and the signs? Can you guarantee that you've always interpreted every situation? Can you guarantee that you will never have done anything whereby your opposite number was not okay with it? I can't. So therefore, it's in every man's interest that this law goes through. It's in every man's interest that only yes means yes. And what we can do as men is we can support women. Sophie Immelman and other colleagues, other activists, such as Mr. Van der Velle, you've opened my eyes as a man. Thank you.
Colleagues, we are closing HDI procedure, and now I would like to ask to take the floor for the Commission. Commissioner Labib, floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President, members of the European Parliament. I should like to begin by thanking you for one of the most lively, passionate debates that I have ever been privy to here in this chamber, but also one of the saddest and most violent. A debate that at times got off the rails with very difficult utterances to have to listen to. Allow me, in my conclusions, to clarify a few points. Yes, things that take place in beds is something that, yes, is of interest to Europe. That is the heart of the debate. And no, rapists are not all foreigners, and they are not from an archaic culture of some sort. What we are talking about here is a crime, one that uses technology, streaming, social networks, drugs, new generation. A crime that doesn't always use violence, because in some member states, violence is consistently mentioned as a recognition of a rape. We need a harmonized, common definition in the European Union such that a rape in one member state cannot be prosecuted in another. And I'd like to congratulate the member of this House who told us her own personal story. We need justice that is consistently applied wherever it may be, in education, in training, such that that consent is the key of any relation, and that if consent is withdrawn, it can be withdrawn at any point during, before, or after a sexual relation. And for the shame to shift sides, for the Commission to go further, for the law that is suggested by the Istanbul Convention that leaves consent open, this is essentially based on a lack of consent. When we adopted our directive to fight violence against women, we did not await that definition, and that is why we need to continue to work and do more. Mindsets have changed, in part because of what happened to Madame Pellico. The Commission, in the weeks to come, will map out legislation that exists around the EU when it comes to crime and rape and consent. And this mapping will perhaps open the door to new ways forward, new legislative proposals from the European Union. The Commission will also support all member states that are implementing Article 35 on the Directive of Violence Against Women when it comes to educative material to promote the awareness of what a consent-based sexual relation is, based on mutual consent and the desire to be a part of it and not to destroy the other. Where in Europe, only yes means yes. This is the future that we want for our girls, for our boys, for men, for women that make up this Europe. And that is precisely the kind of Europe that I want to live in.
Take floor for the rapporteur, Evin Insir, please.
I sincerely do not know sometimes what to say. How hard can it be to just say yes means yes? How hard can it be? The same people on the far right side constantly fails to understand the seriousness that women and girls are living under. It is not a new phenomenon. It's a phenomenon that has been existing all through history in all parts of society. What has changed the last years is that legislations in some member states has actually advanced, which has meant that women and girls do dare more and more extent to report these kind of heinous violences. But we are not there yet where all the women and girls who are victims of this kind of heinous violence dare to do that. That's why we need to continue advance legislations in all our member states. That's why we need an EU-wide consent-based rape legislation now. And let me tell you, MEP Tersh and Sell and some others, all the perpetrators do not have the same color as I. Most of them, or some of them, I don't know how many percentage of them, but at least what I know is that they also do have the same color as you, MEP Tersh and MEP Sell. So stop, continue your racist propaganda. There is no evidence for it. What there is evidence for is that it's not on the streets women and girls are mainly being attacked. The dangerous place for women and girls is at home. Understand that. Colleagues, some people claim that there are no legal grounds. Let me tell you that there are actually legal grounds. Article 83.1 in the treaty constitutes, the EU crimes are, and in the EU crimes, sexual exploitations is included. In the Council Framework Decision 2002-584, Article 2.2 lists 32 specific areas of offense. Rape is included in it. So let's go from words to action. Only yes must mean yes, and everything else must mean no.
Thank you. And second rapporteur also, Joanna Schöring-Wilgus.
Bardzo dziękuję za tę debatę.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you for this discussion. Now, the right wing that showed up here and wanted to talk about such an important issue, look, they've gone. There's only Mr. Teresh left. Now, of course, what he was saying is not true. He's been spreading disinformation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to talk to you, even if you're not here. Please listen. You know, you're really sending out a bad signal here, because most of you, I don't think, have read the document. You're talking about things that don't appear in this document. I think you need to read through the document and try and understand it. And maybe, given that you're here at the European Parliament, maybe you might actually succeed in doing that. Every sexual crime should be dealt with effectively, regardless of the perpetrator and the perpetrator's origins. But if we want to talk about how this should work, we need to base ourselves on facts, not political emotions. I'll give you some facts and figures on Poland in terms of foreigners in Poland. Data from our government. In 2024, out of 1,200 rapes, 48 were perpetrated by foreigners. 48. So it's not true that foreigners are coming here to rape European women. You don't want to read the figures, but the figures show that the lion's share of the violence happens within families, and the perpetrators are the people closest to the women. I would like to conclude by thanking two people who have worked very hard on this document. My two advisors. Without them, this report would not exist. So, in conclusion, Commissioner, we don't really need another mapping exercise to try and understand what we need here. The Commission needs to make a decisive intervention here, and it needs to stand with women.
He's in the hemicycle, and he was all the debate in hemicycle. It's just for protocol. Colleagues, we are closing debate on this point in agenda, and vote will take place tomorrow. Kolēģi, paziņojums pie grupām nepiedarošie deputāti.
Colleagues and non-attached members have informed the chairman about appointment to committees and delegations. These decisions are included in the minutes of this meeting, and they will take force on the date of this notice. The next item on the agenda, Julian Sanchez's report, protection of the European Union's